Great. Well, welcome everyone. We're really excited about this conversation that we're about to have. And I want to thank the Foundation for Social Connection and RSA US for partnering with us on this webinar. Next slide. We would love for everyone to get to know each other a little bit. So if you wouldn't mind, please answer this question in the chat so that you can get to know one another. Why did you join us today? What is your reason for being here? And if you have any pressing questions that you want to ask Aaron after his presentation, please do drop them in the chat. Diana Fisher on my team at Workday is the moderator who will be tracking the questions and grouping them into key themes. And we will leave about 10 minutes at the end to get to as many as possible. Next slide. So why are we here today? Disconnection is one of the biggest issues of our time. That's why the Workday Foundation is investing in this area. We believe that strong social ties and the desire and ability to connect across our differences are vital parts of a thriving community. As you may have read, right now, there really is a loneliness epidemic in this country that can be linked to changes in habits that have been brought on by the internet, by social media algorithms, online shopping, self-checkout kiosks, a decline in regular religious services, the lasting effects from the pandemic and remote work. So for nearly 5 years now, we have been investing in a number of organizations that promote human connectedness and address civic disengagement and foster unity. The growing loneliness epidemic aligns with the rise of toxic polarization, and we believe that societal progress really depends on building deeper human connections and a sense of belonging in our communities and as a nation. And at Workday, and I know Aaron and I have talked about this, we really predict that this is where we will see a growing focus and attention and investments from both the public and private sectors. Next slide. So one of our grantees at the Workday Foundation is More in Common, and they recently published some very interesting research in the connection opportunity, which is available to all of you free online. And it really addressed the fact that Americans are seeking deeper connection across differences. So you can see the stats here. 74% wish that they had more meaningful conversations in their daily lives. This gets back to what I was originally saying about the fact that we're now being pushed to self-checkout kiosks. Just a small example, right? We don't get that interaction we used to have when we were waiting in line, talking to people in front and behind us and talking to the cashier. 71% of people believe that we have more in common than what divides us, and they want to connect across differences. This is super important as we think about coming together and social cohesion as a country. 70% want more opportunities to connect with people in their local communities. And Aaron's going to talk about all of the opportunities he's providing to people to make this possible. And 66% of Americans say that they prefer to connect with others through structured activities. And we're going to talk about that a bit as well. So next slide. I'm so excited. We at the Workday Foundation, we are investing in Aaron and the US Chamber of Connection to plan for opening a chapter in Washington, D.C. And later in the webinar, you can learn how you can bring a chapter to your city. I've known Aaron for a really long time. We sort of grew up together in the social impact space. And he is the person to lead this change at this moment. He's a highly successful social entrepreneur, for those of you that are already familiar with his previous work, but he has the ambition to match this need. He's a systems thinker. He's built global movements. He really works beautifully across sectors, and he's an expert in purpose, connection, and volunteering. And so I'm so excited to be in conversation with him. The US Chamber of Connection launched in February, and it is amazing to see the results already. And it's been 100% volunteer run, which is just incredible. So next slide, I'm going to start. Aaron, Can you please share your vision for the US Chamber of Connection and how did you pick this to focus on?
Yeah, Karen, I love the way you framed it overall, and so excited to be working with you on this on so many different levels. But yeah, for me, it really echoes something that you shared earlier. I really believe as I look around the country and the world that disconnection is our number one problem. If you look at everything, as we said, from health to democracy to our economy to equality, it all comes back to the fact that we're disconnected. And when we're disconnected, we're unhealthy and we're unable to work together and we're unable to solve problems like climate change, housing inequality, et cetera. So just as I looked at this last year, I was like, if I'm going to focus on one thing the rest of my career, I want to give it my best shot at figuring out how do we address connection. And as I looked across the country, what really stood out to me is that there's incredible research, like you just shared. There's great convenings. There are a million amazing programs happening down, like, in our cities, and yet we're not making progress. And there's something missing in the middle. There's a missing infrastructure layer. So really sort of came up with this idea of like, what if there was a US Chamber of Connection that provided that layer necessary in every city to take all those amazing resources, but enable people to actually connect to them in a way in which they stick and do that in a way, as you shared, that's structured, because we all think social just happens without structure. It doesn't. It needs to be meaningful, not transactional. We need to cross over boundaries, and it's got to be hyper local. Connection is not something that is done any way in a meaningful way, except for at a hyper local level.
Erin, you also, when you started this, you pitched it to me and you were like, I have this idea. Every city across America has a chamber of commerce. And if we value and believe in the chamber of commerce, shouldn't we also value and believe in a chamber of connection? And I just loved that framing. And you're a genius marketer, so it worked for me. Okay, so beyond being personally based in Seattle, why do you think that Seattle was the right city for this pilot?
Yeah, so I moved to Seattle about 10 years ago, and I struggled as someone moving to the city to find friends, to find community. So I had a very personal experience with this. And I think the personal part of this story as well, this is strategic. I also felt it as an individual. Like I felt this pain as someone moving to a city, having moved 12 times in my life. Like I've just struggled always with trying to figure out how do I find belonging? How do I find community? And Seattle is a very interesting city. It is, I think, the most beautiful city in the country, but it has a lot of challenges socially. And according to Gallup, or sorry, census data, we see it's like I think it's the second city with the second lowest level of connection in the country. And this data point below it just blows me away. Basically, half of people don't want to interact with anyone they don't know. Like, how are we ever going to do anything productive as a society if we're not willing to talk to other people that we don't know? So we've got this incredible low level of connection. People don't want to talk to other people. But at the same time, it's got some of the highest levels of volunteering, which is great. It's one of the best cities for third places in the country. I mean, we've got 420 coffee shops. Starbucks, which sort of made the third place sort of a popular term, was founded and based here. We've got almost 500 parks with an incredible park system, bazillion restaurants, like everything you could imagine in terms of that level of resources. And we also have, at least in terms of survey, people saying, I want to be inclusive. And yet, if you want to be inclusive, you need to talk to people you don't know. So something's happening here in the system where you've got a lot of what should be the ingredients, but you're not seeing the results. So it's a very interesting place to look at, like, what is that middle piece that's missing that's preventing these things that should be creating connection from actually creating connection? Oh, you're on mute, Carrie.
Sorry. Seattle really speaks to the need for a new approach. And you just mentioned, just having more places and programs doesn't close the gap. And I see that someone dropped in the chat, like, do how does this compare to a Rotary or a Lions Club, which seems to meet similar missions? And I think that your point is the infrastructure is missing, right? Like the places exist and disconnected pockets of connection exist. Can you speak to that a little bit about what you're seeing in Seattle as an
No, I think
example?
they do exist. And I think that's part of where the parallel to the Chamber of Commerce is interesting. You would say in Seattle, there's businesses. So what's the problem, right? There's a need to come together to create a shared voice and to create a vehicle for which to enable collaboration and enable people to access the right resources to build the capacity of it. So, like it's a very similar situation where you have you have the organizations, but you don't have the ability to come together and create something cohesive that is actually human-centered versus just we've got stuff out there, good luck, which is kind of what it
Right,
is. And that's why, in
right.
Seattle, like, Seattle freeze is a very well-known phenomenon. Like this is the narrative for the city, and it's fundamentally an anti-social narrative, and people were finding norm to that narrative. And this is one of the biggest
Uh-huh.
ahas we have is that if your city doesn't have a pro-social narrative, a lot of these things aren't going to really make much of an impact. And a big part of what we need to do is look at how do we shift city narratives to be pro-social so that it actually changes identity and reinforces the behaviors that are needed.
Okay, so you touched upon this a little bit. Like, what was your personal experience moving to Seattle? Did you experience the freeze? How did you make
Absolutely.
connections? Like, what did you do?
Yeah, I was miserable, honestly, Carrie. Like I moved here as a trailing spouse. My wife had a job. She had an immediate community with that. I was running a company that was still based in Brooklyn. I was, busy with the kids. I tried to make plans. I had people over for dinner. They never reciprocated. Tried to sort of invite people to coffee, et cetera. And like over and over again, like just people just you felt this freeze. And for a while, I honestly just gave up. I was like, screw this. Like I'm just gonna do my thing, spend time with my family and my dog. I travel for work and was pretty miserable, to be honest with you. And I think that's part of why I sort of just flipped a switch of saying, I can continue to be miserable or I can actually be part of solving this for other people as well. And started that, and I'll talk about this later, but started just doing dinner parties at my house. And I didn't care if people reciprocate. I'm just going to have strangers over for dinner. I'm just going to go out there and sort of create this change and just was amazed by when you create that opening, what happens.
Yeah, I mean, as an employer, we see this in people moving for a job, to workday locations and how hard it is for them when they leave their communities behind and need to rebuild them.
Yeah.
So that really resonates. I think we've all felt that. I also love that you, as an extrovert, are like, sure, I'll have strangers into my house for dinner. We already know that not everybody has that aptitude, attitude, or desire. And so the fact that you're giving people this safe opportunity to come together in a different way is, I think, pretty unique and awesome. Okay, so newcomers are only part of the population of a city. How can focusing on them change the whole city? Like, why newcomers?
Yeah, so newcomers are it's super interesting. So Seattle has 60,000 newcomers a year, Carrie. Like that's a football stadium full of people like descending on a city. And Seattle, which I don't think it's that unusual, 35% of people here are actually even from the state. So you've got a city that is almost entirely newcomers to begin with. And I think that's the American experience is that we all migrate a lot across the country and around the country. And yet that's what's disrupting a lot of connection because we leave behind our friends, we leave behind our family, and we're moved to a new place and we have to rebuild all that and it's incredibly challenging even in the best circumstances and 12 million people do this every year in the US like they completely uproot and move so it is a perfect time to engage people and a lot of that's because it's when people are actually going through a transition and when people go through a transition is when they're in a growth mindset typically and therefore open to change in connections open to change in how they actually have behaviors and willingness to meet with different types of people, et cetera.
Interesting that you decided to focus on the transition moment. And I think you have a slide on this too.
Yeah.
The transition moment versus a specific demographic, right? Like you're really trying to bring people together in this moment when they're super receptive and open to meeting new people and becoming linked to a community and to form an identity as I don't know what you're called in Seattle, Seattleites,
Yes.
Seattleans.
You win. Yep. Seattleites. Um,
Yeah, so I think that that's a really interesting moment where people are open. And for any of us that have moved, we know that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm starting over from scratch. This is so scary. I don't have a community. I don't have my safety net here. So
yeah.
I love that you're providing people with that opportunity right
It's
when they land.
it's even more than that because I think when you looked at other like A, it covers every demographic in a city by doing that, but it's also a demographic everyone can connect with. So if it was just a specific ethnic group, you can't rally the whole city around just one ethnic group. If it was about kids, like there's a limit to how many people can actually engage and support kids, just given the appropriate boundaries around that. Newcomers are a population that everyone in a city can rally behind and who in some ways look like them in one way or another. So it's a unique demographic that actually enables everyone to participate in a city. There's no other demographic we found that has that level of accessibility for a movement.
I know you're going to be talking about this later, and so I don't want it. Spoiler alert. It turns out that when you did this, old timers, long timers also turned up. So this, what you thought was going to be something that was going to only appeal to newcomers, ended up appealing to a much broader audience. And we can talk about that because I know that there are a lot of cities where you're not seeing these huge demographic shifts and migration patterns, and this is still applicable in those cities as well. But we'll get there. So I know you wanted to focus on newcomers, but how did you go about designing your approach?
Yeah, so we were really lucky that co-founder Lindsay Morrison is with the Foundation for Social Connection, who's one of our partners on today's webinar, and we're a partner of theirs. And they have an actual guide that they put together with funding from Einhorn to like really look at how do you go from we want to do something to actually having a plan, and how do we engage stakeholders along the way? How do we do the research? How do we test and pilot the idea? So we're very lucky to have that framework to use for the development of this program. So we went out and I probably interviewed 200 people. I had almost 200 people to my house for dinners for a very concentrated conversation about connection. We did a 3-day design studio to really think about what should the life cycle of like a year of a newcomer look like? What should the experience be emotionally? What should it be in terms of their actual actions? What could the city do? What could employers do? So we did like a lot of work just to really refine and figure out how to do this with stakeholders across the city. And that's really what gave us, I think, the confidence and also honestly gave us the buy-in from a lot of stakeholders to move this forward.
Yeah, I love that you weren't recreating the wheel. You were taking best practices and validated research and building a program around that. That's awesome. So I have to ask, I've seen all of your media and posts about Sam. How did he come about? I really want to meet him.
We might be able to arrange that, Carrie, if you're
Okay,
lucky.
good.
So what's interesting, I shared earlier, is that a lot of the challenge with connection actually is at a narrative city level, which is not, intuitive to people necessarily, but the reality is like when you have a negative identity socially, people actually reinforce that identity and it makes it okay to not be pro-social. So we realize that part of what we're going to have to do to change the culture of Seattle and address connection is we need a new narrative. We need to replace the Seattle freeze with something. And we came up with this idea of goodbye Seattle freeze, hello Seattle bear hug, and love the idea that a bear hug like is a manifestation of what we're trying to create. We want anyone who comes off a plane in Seattle to feel like they're being enveloped in an incredible cozy bear hug, and that we want that to be the thing that we want to emulate. And I was just browsing and found this incredible mascot of Sam the bear, and we ordered him, and we've had volunteers who are in play Sam all around the city, just giving out bear hugs. And it's been an incredible way for people just to think that there's something possible besides the Seattle freeze. And we've had more requests for people saying, "Can you bring Sam to an event?" than honestly we have capacity right now to deliver on. He's now one of the most popular Seattleites out there, and we're just trying to figure out how to get Sam everywhere all the time because he is so popular. And it's part of a broader narrative of how can we make Seattle the most welcoming city in America. So how can we go from struggling at something to actually have an ambition? Because I think part of changing a culture is a vision for something different. So how do we say we want to become the most welcoming city and have that as the goal instead of constantly falling back to this old narrative around Seattle freeze that serves nobody? And he is just adorable and the best thing to hug ever.
Yeah, I mean, everyone loves a mascot, especially one that cute. Okay, so the anchor of your approach is Seattle Welcome Day.
Yep.
What happens on these days?
Yeah, so it's been great. The mayor's endorsed this as the official welcome day for the city. And once a month, we have a 4-hour event that happens at a nonprofit called Town Hall. They've got this beautiful space. And it's this 4 hours where we have people go through and actually design and create a vision for the life they want to create in Seattle that's relationship centric. We help them learn how to ask for help because the key to building connection is asking for help. And then we get them signed up to do activities afterwards. So it's very much 4 hours that's about self-discovery. It's about in-depth peer coaching with other newcomers, supporting each other. It's about learning the skills, and it's about understanding what connection actually is. So it's creating that educational and activation layer for newcomers in the city. And it's just been so inspiring just to see how people courageously show up, but that they walk out of it with a sense of hope and also with the sense that they are now a Seattleite. Because one of the things here in Cary, I heard during our research, people who've lived here 25 years are like, well, I can't call myself a Seattleite. I've only been here 25 years. So we're like, bullshit. The second you get off the plane, you're a Seattleite if you choose to be one. So a big part of this is also sort of the equivalent of an immigration ceremony, but it's like you're now a Seattleite. It's up to you to decide if you're a Seattleite. No one gets to tell you that. So it's a statement of belonging and inclusion that the city, despite being incredibly progressive, is one of the least inclusive cities in terms of that message. It's like, unless you're 26 generations in Seattle, like you're not a Seattleite. You're like, the city's only 150 years old to begin with. So like, let's calm down there and like rethink how we define what a Seattleite is.
Yeah, I love that. I think it resonates with a lot of us who have moved to towns where there have been deep connections and multi-generational families living in the same town for a long time. And you go into a town like that, and they almost take pride in their like salty, exclusionary kind of attitude of like, you're a newcomer, you always will be because your great grandfather didn't go to school with me.
Yeah.
Um, and so I love that you're just flipping that script completely in Seattle and saying, no, what if we could actually embrace the positivity that comes with being the most welcoming city? Like there's no pride badge for being exclusionary. I just really love that.
I
So
always I take it back
yeah,
to kids. Like when I have people pushing back on it, I'm like, well, if your kids move somewhere, is this how you'd want them treated?
right,
Well, no, no. I'm like, okay, like, what's going on here? Um,
right.
yeah, it's super interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So how did you come up with these 6 points of connection?
So one of the things we saw in the research, Carrie, was that people didn't even know what it meant to have connection. Like they knew they wanted it, but they didn't really understand like what would it look like if I actually had it. They had no sense of definition for that. So it was this sort of this amorphous thing, which made it hard to measure, hard to assess personally, and hard to know, am I making progress, right? So if we think about exercise, we have models for that. Think about food, we have models for that. We didn't have a model as human beings for like how we should think about connection. So we reviewed all the research on urban planning, the health research, the research around democracy, all these different fields that care about connection. And we found there's basically these 6 things that encompass the things that you need to do as an individual to both thrive personally from a connection standpoint, but also so that the community in which you live is thriving. Because it's not enough just to take care of yourself. That's not sustainable if you're not also investing in the community around you. So it ranges from like at a safety level, having a neighborhood contact, someone in your neighborhood you can call if you need something, to being able to have the strong bonding by having people like yourself in community, being able to build those one-on-one interactions a couple of times a week, having a third place to go to start to mingle with people who are a little different than you, being part of a community of people around an activity, which is something that brings you joy, but also connects you to people who are different than you. And then volunteering, which you know I love as a core of who I am, but that's also a core part we found of the research around like what actually enables someone to thrive. So our core model is that we want to help everyone in the cities in which we operate develop these 6 points of connection. And this is how we're measuring success, because just measuring if someone's lonely or not is not something that's actionable. These are actionable things. Similar to like if you eat lunch, the odds are you won't be hungry. If you do these things, the odds are you won't be lonely. So it's a human-centered approach instead of a research-oriented approach, because we felt like that was really missing in the field.
I feel like this is one of the things I love most about you, Erin, is you're so pragmatic and like we can do this. Like this is super tangible. It's been missing from the field. And it's such an easy way for me and other funders to go and talk to our boards about what it is that we're trying to achieve and how we will measure impact. And I think for those practitioners that are on the call, this is just yet another tool in the toolbox to use as you're measuring impact. I love it. I think it's great.
And it can be used like for employees. I mean, it can be used in a lot of ways. It can be used to teach, high school kids and college kids about connection. There's so many uses for it because it becomes accessible, to your point.
Yeah. So, one thing that I've seen clearly since COVID is the decline in the frequency and opportunity for in real life human interactions. So, can you share the journey that you are creating in Seattle for newcomers?
Yeah. So what's interesting, Carrie, is again, like there's a lot of events out there and opportunities to engage. What we're seeing is actually what's needed here is behavior change. And that we need to help people understand and be aware of what it means to have connection. So what are the 6 points? Why do they matter? Then helping them actually have desire for it, showing them the research, showing them, giving them a taste at welcome day of a connection with a stranger where they're like, holy crap, I didn't want to talk to you, but now like I'm so interested in following up with you because we actually had a meaningful, structured interaction, to knowledge. Do I know actually how to build connection? Do I understand what that process looks like? So giving that education, then making sure they have the ability, which means the places, the people, the tools to do it. And that has to be reinforced, or else, like any habit, it starts to degrade. So, how do we provide that reinforcement mechanism? So, what we're really building is, let's get the 6 points for everyone, but let's not just do it by saying, hey, Carrie, do your 6 points, goddammit, but instead say, let's help you on this journey of becoming aware, having the desire, knowing how to do it, having the ability to do it, and to reinforce it. And this creates the ability for us to also learn as an organization. I think we're doing a great job of this, but we can even do better. But it gives us a way to say, okay, are we doing enough to build awareness? Are we doing enough to build desire throughout this process?
Okay, so as you thought about how you were going to actually launch this, I know that you did a really great job of creating what you're calling the Seattle Welcome Committee. How did you pitch this to them, and like what were you hoping that they would be able to accomplish?
So, Carrie, I think one of the things I'm political by nature, not meaning partisan, but just I believe in bringing together people to create collective power for change. And I don't believe we can address connection in our cities if we don't have some sort of commission of leaders across sectors. This can't just be a healthcare thing, can't be a business thing, can't be a government thing. We need to, across all of our sectors who all care about this issue, we need to come together to become a force for advocacy, but also a force for just change inside our own communities. We also, to reach newcomers, need people out there being advocates to help bring newcomers into the program. So I just started talking to leaders across the city in business, nonprofit, government, sports, arts, like across the board, and pitching the idea, like, what do you think of making Seattle the most welcoming city in the country? And do you want to help me do that? And I think I got two no's, like in those conversations. Like people are, it just, especially right now with so much going on in the country, people want to do something local that matters, that's tangible, and been incredible just to have all these leaders sign up to become the steering committee for the city on helping to address connection. And they've been instrumental in the launch, but our hope is we can really morph that into much more of like a commission for connection for the city that is helping to measure and steer us as a city. Yes, what we're doing, but even more broadly. So this is always top of the radar. And just like the Chamber of Commerce has the ear of the mayor, Chamber of Connection and this commission needs to have the ear of the mayor, because I would argue this matters more than commerce.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's certainly important. I know that you guys got a ton of local press on this launch. Why do you think you got so much media coverage?
Well, Sam the Bear, number
Okay.
one. Has
So
anyone
note
heard
to
about
everyone on the call, get a mascot.
a mascot?
Okay.
Sam the Bear was huge because we had all the TV stations reaching out saying, can we do a ride along? We want to do a piece on Sam the Bear, because it is TV friendly, right? And I think also just having the aspirations to say we want to be the most welcoming city was something that just inspired people. And it was also feel good at a time right after the election where in Seattle, frankly, is a very progressive city. And I think there was a lot of like, where can we find a sense of hope for bringing us back together as a country? And this was a feel good story. And it was one in which anyone listening, reading, or watching media had a role in. So it's like a universal story. And we've been lucky enough to actually partner with a local ABC affiliate now, where every month we have 2 segments on connection to help educate people about it and to celebrate community builders. So the media has just been an incredible partner in this process.
So now that you've done 3 welcome days in Seattle, what have you learned about who's attending?
Yeah, I honestly, Carrie, like I set up the welcome committee to try to get diverse groups of people to represent the city, and didn't, I would say, an okay job of doing that. I didn't know who was going to show up. Like I really didn't know. I was honestly scared it was going to be like all Amazon employees or all seniors or all University of Washington students. And I have just been thrilled that the groups that are showing up for Welcome Day, we've had about 75-ish per Welcome Day. When you look at the demographics of them, within a statistical margin of error, they represent the adult population of Seattle. They're slightly more female. Race ethnicity is pretty closely tied to the city of Seattle, which is incredible. We have 17-year-old to a 79-year-old, and it almost exactly mirrors the curve of age in the city. So it's not any one age that's showing up. It's truly multi-generational, which we all know is critical. And then we have slightly skewed towards unemployed versus employed, but it's pretty close to the city average. And we're hearing from people sort of actually at Welcome Day that one of the things they love about it is that it's low to no cost for entry and that everything we're doing is low to no cost. So we're getting a lot of people who just don't have economic means to do this, whereas these types of things traditionally are only available to people with a certain level of financial resources. We're really finding this is reaching people who are budget constrained seriously.
I think that it's so important right now to focus on the common good versus the needs of one population. So I love that you're doing that. Newcomers are really interesting in that focus, but I know that in speaking with someone that attended your last welcome day, that there were lots of people that were going through other life transitions, either empty nesters or those that recently retired, and were feeling a lack of social connection. And so they came too, which I just love to hear.
Yeah,
So yeah, go for
no,
it.
absolutely. And I didn't really sort of double down on the common good thing is so important to me because I think what we've done in philanthropy and what we've done in the nonprofit sector and with cities is a lot is focus on targeted population, but in which makes sense in a lot of ways, but it's actually creating further silos. What I love about this work is that it's truly for everyone. It doesn't matter your economic status, it doesn't matter your race, it doesn't matter your gender. When you move or go through a transition, it's a universal experience. And I think our country, our cities need way more of these opportunities that are truly for everyone, not just for one population. But on the question around who's showing up population wise, we market this as an event for newcomers. It's designed as an event for newcomers. What we're finding is that newcomers are almost more of a mindset than it is like a definition.
Hmm.
It's attracting people who are, new. 57% moved in the last 3 years, but we're getting, nearly half of the people who moved way before, way before then. And to your point, like one of the stories I loved was it was a couple who their kids had just gone off to college, and they're like, well, it's kind of like we're moving to Seattle all over again because we're just changing like who our friends are, what we're doing, the communities, what's possible. So it's like a fresh start. And I think newcomer really means like fresh start. Like I want a fresh start. I want to reboot my life, whether it's because I literally just moved or I figuratively just moved. I want to do that. And what we're seeing with this population is they're roughly 3 times lonelier than the general American population from a research perspective. So we're seeing very high loneliness in these transition moments, which is why this is the time to really reach people, whether it's a newcomer literally or more of the figurative mindset.
So let's talk about unmet needs. I
Yep.
feel like you shared this with me, but this is so concrete and makes it clear where we need to help people. So are these numbers what you expected? And what do you think one-on-one connection, like why is that the lowest?
Yeah, it's they are roughly what I expected. So this is people coming into our welcome day. We ask them to
Yeah.
just do a quick pulse on like where do you stand on each of these, and this is the percentage of people who say like they generally have that need met. And it's clear to me like people are doing a little bit better with the neighborhood contact, but only half of people having contact with a neighbor is a problem. People are not finding communities of people like themselves. I'll come back to one-on-one. Third place, people at least I think it's easy to say yes to actually like I've identified a cafe. It doesn't mean they're necessarily engaging
Yeah.
per se. Many of them are still looking for activities and ways to be part of the community that are more playful and shared interest. And relatively low level of volunteering from my point of view, because anything less than 100% is totally unacceptable in my perspective. I think one-on-one social interactions is the most intimate of all of these. And I think that's where people are having the most trouble. Like they're not developing meaningful, positive, consistent relationships. And a lot of that's because they need to do these other things first. That's where they meet the people to convert into these one-on-one relationships. And we have also, to your point, we've lost the skills, I think, during COVID to have one-on-one interactions with people. So this is an area where we just need to do a lot more education and trial and error. And that's why Welcome Day, a lot of it's done in dyads of two people talking and just showing them what a meaningful conversation looks like. Because a lot of people just talk about, hey, what have you watched on Netflix recently? And what are you doing this weekend? There's not the depth of interaction.
Yeah, at Workday, we did an 8-week bridge building
Yep.
series that was based on the US, I'm sorry, the Greater Good Science Center's free resources. And then we did a class on navigating difficult conversations. And it was a way for people to get a little bit comfortable getting past the what did you watch on Netflix so that they could build those deeper connections. And it wasn't just this superficial conversation that you might have with someone that you hardly know. And it was really well received. I think people just need to feel comfortable and have a level of trust in order to be able to engage in that way. And you're providing obviously an opportunity for people to do that. So
And
in
we,
looking at your impact, oh, sorry.
Just gonna add, my last company, Imperative, that's what we did. We built an online peer coaching platform where peers would have deep, meaningful conversations. And I think there's been over 200,000 of them and sort of refined that model. And that's a lot of what we're using in Welcome Day is this protocol for how to accelerate meaningful interaction based on the science of that, which has been, it's just amazing again, just to see strangers accelerate into meaning.
I love that. So, looking at your impact, how are you thinking about this data and how do you plan to continue to optimize and expand the program?
Yeah, so we just started measuring this piece at the last Welcome Day, so we have a smaller data set, but it's the curve that we were hoping for, which is someone comes very lonely, lacking in their 6 points of connection over 4 hours, which is not a lifetime. So it's a small investment of time. We're seeing that people are now saying they know, majority now, 74%, three-quarters of people are saying, I know what connection I need to thrive. Like that's a huge starting place. We're seeing that we've built the desire for them to want to do that. We're seeing we're early, like that's I probably would have expected those two things to happen realistically in the 4 hours. We're already seeing like major progress towards I know how to build it, which we provide some of that content. I have what I need to build it, and I can sustain it. So what we're going to do going forward is just continuously refine both Welcome Day and everything we're doing around these numbers so that we can, get this as quick and as impactful as possible.
And have you set goals as an organization about where you want those numbers to be? Like, what does success look like? Since this is so new, what would the bar be? I don't even know.
I mean, I'm an entrepreneur and ambitious, so like 100% is always my goal.
Okay.
Realistically,
I
it's
love it.
probably realistically just given mental health and different
Yeah.
types of sort of variables, it's probably something in like the 85% range would be wildly
Okay.
successful. I
Yeah.
mean, these are great numbers, and these are A's, I think, on a Ivy League in an Ivy League class. Like I think these are very high grades, but they're not good enough for me. I want to make sure we're doing better.
So one of the things that I really like about your model is that it's continuous, right? Like it's not just one and done. It's not just like, oh, look, you attended a welcome day. So what are people doing after welcome day?
Yeah, so that's really the kickoff. It's giving them the education, the connection, the trust. We've set up infrastructure, partnering with a couple of small tech companies to enable people to do things afterwards, and then engaging volunteers, which we'll talk about later. So people can sign up for upcoming activities, and we're seeing almost 80% of people saying they plan to do that. They plan to follow up with people they met, and you can see here on the right, 81% say they met someone they plan to stay in contact with who is a bridging relationship, someone different than them, which gives me hope for our country. Bonding, 69% of people said they met someone like them, which gives them that safety and that bonding relationship. So we're seeing people saying, I plan to follow up. We have a community app called Halo, which we've been partnering with them, incredible startup. And we're seeing people just posting on there like, hey, I'm going to the movies. Anybody want to come? Or hey, like I want to go play pickleball. Anybody want to come? So we're starting to just build a community where people can ask each other, knowing they're all newcomers or in this mindset. So it's safe for them to do it. And then we're just piloting actually today for the first time, which I'll talk about in a second, matching people for coffee based on shared interests so that people can actually start to do that. And I added this slide, Carrie, this morning, which you probably didn't see in your original deck I sent you, but just to give you a sense of the kind of activities we're doing. So we're doing Museum and a Meal of the Month, where we're going to introduce people to the arts together, farmers market and picnics, bike rides, walks, like these kinds of activities for groups of 8 to 15 newcomers, are keeping them small because that's where connection happens, and trying people to get people to attend 6 of them because that's how long it takes for someone to truly bond. And then we're doing these coffee matches where we're matching people for an hour of coffee at a local cafe to support the local economy and helping people have a meaningful conversation by highlighting what interests they share. So they have an initial launching off point for their conversation. And someone maybe someday will actually get to have a coffee with Sam as well, which will be amazing. But
Well, I can see in the chat that you've got some people that are super psyched about these upcoming events in
yeah.
Seattle. So that's good news. And looking back at the More in Common study, what you're doing and the ongoing engagement, it really proves the power of meaningful, local, diverse, and structured opportunities for connection. I think that, for us and other funders and practitioners probably on this call, because this connection touches upon so many different issues. So if you're a democracy funder, if you are a longevity funder, a healthcare funder, a mental health funder. This is something that touches so many different issues. And if we can actually bring people together across differences to build trusted connection, I just feel like the world is going to be a much kinder place. That's for sure. So thinking about your tagline, when you started the Taproot Foundation, it was volunteering redefined. Why are you using that again?
Yeah, so we used that at the time because we felt like business professionals were not getting, we're not seeing volunteer opportunities to use their professional skills to be able to volunteer, and had written off volunteering. They said, "Oh, like that's not for me." Like, but when we redefined it and said, "No, you can use your marketing skills, you can use your tech skills," it opened up like a whole new market of service that has changed, certainly corporate volunteering. Um, with this organization, with the U.S. Chamber of Connection, we're doing that again. I just went on a bunch of college tours, Carrie for my son. And one of the things I always talk about is like, what's the faculty to student ratio? And our volunteer to newcomer ratio is about 1 to 1. We are finding basically a volunteer per newcomer who's signing up to want to be part of
Wow,
this. And it's because it's a very comfortable place for people to serve. It's something that directly meets their own needs because they want connection themselves. And they're
totally.
teaching them how to build connection. So there's a strong educational component to it. So we have 150 volunteers who've signed up so far. We are bringing on professional facilitators. So at our welcome day, every table has a professional volunteer facilitator helping the people. We have neighborhood organizers, we've got activity hosts, we've got the welcome committee we talked about, and then we've got volunteers just on our online community helping people, newcomers on the community. So we envision the ability to like really build out a whole new form of volunteering that companies and others can use to find new avenues for people who may not have been able to engage as companies as volunteers, to get them out into the community, get them out also in addressing their own well-being. So you get this sort of double whammy of service and well-being.
Totally
And we
agree.
think we can redefine volunteering again to make these exist today, but do this at a large scale and through a nonprofit so they can actually count as sort of formal volunteer activities, and have been thrilled with the early interest from companies to say, wow, like let's really think about how we can redefine volunteering again around addressing connection. Because we've got the biggest problem in the country, connection. We've got all these people who want to serve, like how can we put that together?
Yeah, I always say that volunteering is a selfish act. And this is one of those things where I would jump right in because I want to strengthen my social connection. So to me, this is the perfect opportunity to do something like that. So, what is your vision for what a local Chamber of Connection chapter would look like at scale?
Yeah, so I think there's two pieces to it. There's like, what are we doing on like the volume of it? So, um, right now we piloted this. We need to get to the point where we've probably got, somewhere between 10 and 25,000 people engaged to actually shift culture in a city like Seattle. So we're helping a lot of individuals. We're making incremental impact. The culture shift will happen when, in a given year, there's 10 to 25,000 people engaged where they just start becoming a flywheel that's impacting everyone else around them. Every one of those volunteers is now not only helping the newcomers, but they're using those skills in their lives more broadly and inside their organizations. And we're trying to shift the narrative. So, we're really looking at how do we scale this up where we've got, 1,000 people a month or more engaging in Welcome Day instead of 75. So that's one dimension. But we think about it in terms of infrastructure. These are the things that we've really seen coming out of our work so far is one, we need to have a vision and pro-social narrative. People need to have an ambitious idea for what their city's about that is something that reinforces pro-social behavior. And we believe every city needs to have that. Cross-sector leadership. There needs to be commission, a council, a committee, whatever you want to call it, that works across sectors and is looking at how are we doing on the 6 points of connection as a city and looking at where further investments need to be made, not necessarily in the Chamber of Connection, but just in our schools, in our government, in given neighborhoods. We need that kind of oversight. Right now, there's just no oversight of connection in cities, and it's a huge problem if we want to address this. We need the measurable framework, which is our 6 points of connection combined with that adoption journey, so that every city has a model to work with instead of just saying, hey, connection, everyone do it, it's great. Like we need that structure. We need newcomer activation in every city. We've got 60,000 of them every year in Seattle. Like, how do we get to a meaningful percentage of those? As I think the research shows, like we need neighborhood ecosystems. So just like the Chamber of Commerce has, a Seattle Chamber of Commerce, it also generally has each neighborhood has its own Chamber of Commerce. And we believe that, eventually we're going to need to set up a lot of this infrastructure at a neighborhood level for folks. And then we need a massive volunteer model that just engages one volunteer for every newcomer involved in the program out there doing this and becoming part of that ripple effect. And we believe if a city does this, we can reverse the decline in connection. Investing in a lot of the smaller things is important, but if we don't invest in this infrastructure, there's not that multiplier, and we're not actually able to stand up to the forces that are causing the decline.
Okay, so in the last few minutes that we have before we open it up to Q&A, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering how can they join this movement, individuals, practitioners, etc.
Yeah, so in Seattle specifically, we've done this, as you said, as 100% volunteer activity. We did the pilot. We've had all these incredible people. We've had three and a half people working full time as volunteers just to get this off the ground because we believe so strongly in this. We're now at that point where we need to be able to really start to get this funded and sustainable and scale it up. So we're looking for employers who want to become members, and we can engage your employees, we can engage your newcomers, but we need employers behind this. And we need philanthropists, whether that's individuals or foundations that say, Seattle is going to be a much better city for everyone if we address this issue. And yes, we continue to invest in specific programs for populations, but this is the common good thing we need to bring hope to our city, to bring a sense of momentum, and to see that we can actually activate a lot more philanthropy and volunteering. Because I believe when people are involved in this program, they're going to volunteer and donate that they weren't doing before. So the money you're putting in is going to get matched out the other end as a multiplier by people being activated who otherwise are sitting at home watching Netflix. So it's one of the greatest, I think, multipliers of philanthropic funds that you can have in Seattle.
So the Workday Foundation is helping with the launch in DC, and we still need additional funders to step up and join us for that city's launch. But I know you have national expansion plans. What is the process for opening a chapter in any city that people might have an interest in?
We're so excited to be working with you on DC, especially given how much transitions happen there, like all the time, from government to students to embassies to dot, 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 dot. So super excited for DC. We're setting this up as a model where every city will have a chamber of connection. That's our vision. And that each of those cities will operate as a separate 501c3, just like, you know, United Way, the Girl Scouts, like a lot of these nonprofits that are the foundations of our cities. And we're looking for entrepreneurs who want to be the ED and founder of their local chapter and raise the roughly $1 million needed for the first 3 years of operations. So we're looking for leaders who want to step forward and say, you know, I've got the skills and the passion to do this. I'm going to line up the companies and foundations and city or whatever resources you're able to get that sort of initial money so you have a runway. And then as part of that, we're going to help you with all of our IP, the brand, et cetera, so that it's really easy for you to stand this up. And you'll, you know, start to work on that pro-social identity, setting up your welcome committee. You know, we'll help you launch your volunteer and newcomer programming, and you'll become part of a learning community of every city that signs up. We'll be getting together regularly and just all working to make our programs stronger. But we need this in every city, and I want it so that, Carrie, if you ever have to move to another city, you know there's a chamber of connection there that's going to help you on ramp. It's just like a given. And we need to get to that point, and that's when we can create that critical mass as a country and fundamentally reverse the decline in connection and trust as a nation, not just as a given city. So we'd love to
I
hear
love that.
if they're interested, or if there's a foundation that wants to help seed that and search for that right, you know, individual. We're expecting in some cases it'll be incubated inside a nonprofit and then spun out. I think there's a bunch of different models. We need to learn that. It's part of the pilot of expansion. And excited to be on that journey, but this has to happen. Like as an American, as a human being, like we need this in place. People are suffering, our economy is suffering, our democracy is suffering. We can't continue treating symptoms. We've got to treat the root cause, or we're not going to make progress, like full stop.
I totally agree. Thank you, my friend. I'm going to open it up to Q&A. I see that people have dropped some questions in the chat, and I'm happy to tackle those. Just reading through these, one thing I want to address right away, this is being recorded. Yes, we can share the recording. And then people are asking about the chat. I don't see why we couldn't also share the chat transcript. So yes, we can make that happen, I think,
Yeah.
if technology cooperates. So a couple of questions, Aaron, that I'm seeing in the chat. Are you partnering with Seattle Works or other volunteer orgs to facilitate the volunteer part of what you're doing?
Seattle Works actually shut down a couple years ago.
Oh, okay.
Seattle has
So
a
there we go.
really underdeveloped volunteer infrastructure as a city. United Way has a program that's doing some work, but there's in general not good infrastructure for volunteering in Seattle anymore. And it's one of the things we really want to sort of work on helping to address, because if you don't have that infrastructure, like we have so many people coming saying, I want to volunteer, I don't know where to go. And there's not a satisfying answer for that. And we've got to fix that. Like it's just not okay to have that desire to serve that where there's no real clear avenues to do that.
Okay. And do you have, this is from Alice, do you have any tips for developing the shared story of a city?
Love that question. I think a lot of it is listening, like using that process that the Foundation for Social Connection has to just listen and talk to stakeholders and really hear from people the things that are the existing real positive attributes of the city. And then it's just focusing on those and amplifying them versus focusing on the negative. So it's sort of identifying those bright spots, the stories that you can tie to those, and then like amplifying that into a big, hairy, audacious goal for the city that you can rally people behind. And it is so fun to do, and I'm excited to help anybody who wants to do that because I love creating hope because hope is what fuels change.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Another question. In our area, the chamber equals business owners only. So have you had challenges with promoting this to encompass all people who wish to connect who may not want to be there on behalf of their business or employer?
Yeah, so people have said like, why didn't you do this as part of the Chamber of Commerce? And we're like, we are not the Chamber of Commerce. We are playing off that name clearly, but our point is that business can't be the one that owns connection. It's one of 20 important stakeholders, but it can't be where this sits because business will always operate in what's in the best interest of business at the end of the day. We need a body that operates in the best interest of individuals and connection. So we are creating a clear delineation from that and making a point about society that we need not just a chamber of commerce, but also a chamber of connection, which is cross sector.
Okay. And then a question is, do you call out in person versus virtual one-on-one social interactions? Like, how do you differentiate or encourage either or both?
We're focused in real life connection, like full
Okay.
stop. Like that's
Okay.
what's missing. The other things have value. I don't want to diminish them, but what we're all about is getting people back together so that they can truly connect. And we know the science behind how much more value there is in that. We recognize for some people, like there are barriers, et cetera. And like we want to help people meet them where they are. But ultimately, like we want to get back to the point where we are comfortable face to face with each other again. And that we're able to get the health, democracy, et cetera, benefits of that.
Okay, great. And practical question, who's facilitating your events and managing logistics? You mentioned that this is all volunteer run, and I understand that that was for the pilot and that you actually will need funding to make this a sustainable venture and a national org. But how did you approach that, the facilitation of the event and the logistics?
Yeah, so we've had Gensler, who's been one of our big partners, has provided an MC pro bono. I do the 6 points and a lot of the sort of stage work right now just to work it out. We every table has a volunteer facilitator, which we will continue to have. I think a big part of our organization will just be this huge community of facilitators that are doing this as their pro bono work. We have volunteers that are the bear and the bear sort of the bear team. We've got a whole check-in team of volunteers. We've got a volunteer who's in charge of managing the volunteers, a volunteer that's in charge of like being the wedding planner day of the event. So we really have built out a sophisticated volunteer infrastructure to enable this. What's needed on the staffing side is the ability to provide the reliable management, recruiting, training of that group going forward. We want these activities to always be volunteer driven because that adds more value. The staff is there to enable volunteer leaders to make the change. We're not the one making the change. We want the volunteers being the ones on the front line.
Okay, great. And then we had a question about smaller towns. So, how are you thinking about doing this work in smaller towns, smaller suburbs, etc.?
Yeah, so for Seattle, we had that conversation of like, what is Seattle? Because there's Seattle and there's like the broader communities. So first of all, I would just say we're looking at Seattle as like people who live, work, and play in the region, which means really serving ultimately like the metro area, not just the formal city itself. We've been talking to folks in smaller cities across the country, and it's actually the smaller cities where we've seen, and I'd say much smaller than Seattle, like sub, 100,000, maybe 200,000 people is where we're seeing actually the most outreach of people interested in opening up a chamber. So we're very excited about how to do that. I think when you get down to like sub 50,000 people, it's going to take some piloting to figure out what the right model is and how do you create sustainable economics at that size. I think it's doable. It's just going to take some tweaking to think about how does that show up when you've got, fewer people involved, and you've got fewer companies or organizations to fund it on an ongoing basis. So I confidently believe it's possible, but we still have to like do some work to figure that out.
Yeah. Erin, I'm going to close on one question that just popped up that I think is a really great one and one that I know you've thought a lot about. So, how do you ensure that as you grow this in Seattle and in other communities, that the work honors and builds upon the work of existing organizations and people who are already building social connections?
Love it. There are incredible people in Seattle and everywhere doing that. Our goal with this ultimately is to help onboard people into those programs. So we're creating the training, the safety, the sort of initial sort of first steps to get people engaged. But our goal is after a year, like they're now volunteering at an organization. They're now part of a community that is run by a community builder out there that does that professionally or as a volunteer on their own. We're now there to cheer them on. And maybe they're volunteering back with us, but we see ourselves as like onboarding people into all those systems to lift all of that up. And we've been actively doing capacity building of community builders because we want them to be at a place where they can sort of handle this volume of people once we get this up and running. And Carrie, I was giving the comparison to a university because we know in the stats that people who went to university are much less likely to be lonely later on. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of it is universities, we can criticize them all we want. They do a great job in general of teaching people social interaction skills and setting up infrastructure for interaction. And we're largely trying to create that, like turn a city into a university that way. But one of the things that really stands out, like with my daughter in college, is like who your freshman roommate is. They play a really critical role in getting you comfortable and going out and trying things. But generally, you don't remain friends with your freshman roommate. Like you meet new people. We want to be that freshman roommate where like we're helping you get comfortable, have someone to go with to go to things, but we don't expect to necessarily be friends after 2 or 3 years. We expect through this process to you then find those friends, find those communities. But we want to create that safe first freshman roommate for you.
All right. I love that. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you, Erin, for sharing. It is great work. We're happy to support it. And, let's keep building those connections. Thank you to everyone that joined us today. As I said, we will share slides, the recording, and the chat transcript. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.